What do you think would happen if you trained like Bruce Lee for an entire year? What would you do? What do you think that you could accomplish? Would you enter a Sandai tournament and become a champion kung fu fighter? Would you enter a fitness competition and win all kinds of trophies with your new amazing physique? Or maybe you'd impress all the babes and become a total ladies' man.
If some of you are lucky, you might even get laid.
Well, there was one champion mixed martial artist who says they actually did train like Bruce Lee for an entire year. Let's see what happened. So about 2 years ago, a video completely blew up on YouTube about how IFC mixed martial arts champion Bernard McAlister trained like Bruce Lee for 1 year. Now, if you haven't heard about this video from IFC mixed martial arts champion Bernard McAlister, it might be because you know him as his other name, Beerdy, the self-proclaimed world's biggest expert when it comes to Bruce Lee on YouTube. So like I was saying, Beerdy has this video with over 1 million views where he claims that he trained like Bruce Lee for 1 year. And why? Well, because Beerdy has this theory that Bruce Lee died due to adrenal fatigue as a result of overtraining. And so to put his theory to the test, he decided to train like Bruce Lee trained to see if it would kill him. And since I've always been curious about Bruce Lee's training, well, I decided to take a look at what Beerdy had to say and then tell you guys what I think about it. So this is how this is going to go down. I'm going to go over what Beerdy said about his Bruce Lee training program, and then I'm going to compare that to a lot of the things that I said in my last video in the Bruce Lee training series. And then you'll want to keep watching because I'm going to tell you how I would do it if I wanted to train like Bruce Lee for an entire year. And trust me, it's not going to sound like anything that Beerdy said in his video. So let's get into Beerdy's training. So Beerdy has this video, I trained like Bruce Lee for 1 year, and then this happened, where he says that he's testing his hypothesis about Bruce Lee overtraining. He said he trained 6 hours a day for an entire day, but not the 10 hours a day like Bruce Lee did, because, well, Bruce Lee was also taking steroids for his pain. Now remember, I'm only telling you the stuff that Beerdy said, so take all of this with a grain of salt.
The thing is this, Bruce Lee was using steroids to quell his pain, his nerve pain.
Okay, so Beerdy said that he didn't cheat. He didn't use any steroids or take any supplements. He followed the same diet as Bruce Lee, which is, you know, rice, water, and chicken.
And the diet is the same diet that Bruce Lee had. It's pretty much basic. It's rice and water and chicken. I mean, it doesn't get more basic than that.
He didn't take any creatine. He only took a multivitamin. And I'm waiting to get through all of Beardy's stuff before I comment. But Beerdy, I know you're watching this, dog. You do know that creatine is in chicken, right? But okay, so back to Beardy's video. So Beerdy says Bruce Lee trained for 10 hours a day for 7 years and sometimes up to 14 hours a day. Beerdy, he was only able to train for 6 hours a day, and he's the only guy who has ever done this. No one else has ever done anything like this besides himself and Bruce Lee. And the thing is, Beardy's video is like 15 minutes long, and he never says what he actually did. He just talks about how this training turned him into a beast.
You know, people at the midway point when I was feeling like Bruce Lee, people didn't even want to spar with me. They didn't want to train with me because I was just half man, half animal.
His friend said that he could win any competition, and then everybody he knew was afraid to spar with him. But my question was, what did Beerdy actually do for 6 hours a day for an entire year? He never actually says anything about training in this video. He doesn't even show a single video of him actually training. He just has these pictures of people who look like they were training. Well, about 9 days later, Beerdy figured that he could fleece his audience out of some more views because he posted a follow-up video, How to Get a Body Like Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee's insane workout routine and diet finally revealed. So in part 2, Beerdy spends about 6 minutes going over Bruce Lee's diet and supplements. And after saying that he only ate chicken, rice, and water in the first video.
And the diet is the same diet that Bruce Lee had. It's pretty much basic. It's rice and water and chicken.
Well, he goes into this list of foods that Bruce Lee ate. And of course, Beerdy tells everyone that he ate all of that stuff too, not just the chicken, rice, and water.
Why you always lying?
And then Beerdy finally tells everyone about Bruce Lee's workout program that he followed every day for an entire year. Now, according to Beerdy, Bruce Lee did a morning weight training session. He did an evening session with lots of assistant work and stretching. And then after those training sessions, he spent the rest of the day training Jeet Kune Do and sparring. So that's what Beerdy did for an entire year, you know, because he trained like Bruce Lee. And how do we know? Well, because if Beerdy said it in 2 YouTube videos, well, then it must be true. So I'm not even sure where to begin responding to what Beerdy claims is how to get a body like Bruce Lee. I mean, if Beerdy actually did the stuff that he's claiming, well, why doesn't he have any videos of himself, or at least a before and after picture? All he shows are these pictures of fitness models with their heads cut off in the videos. And I can only assume that maybe he wanted people to believe that those pictures were him. But who knows? I mean, at least one of those guys has a beard, right? So, Beerdy, is that you? The diet stuff. At first, Beerdy said that he ate just like Bruce Lee, you know, chicken, rice, and water. But then he goes back and gives more detail in the follow-up video. I mean, that's okay, but it's hilarious to listen to Beerdy stumble and mumble when all he had to say was that Bruce Lee ate Chinese food. So to the folks asking me to do a video on Bruce Lee's diet, Bruce Lee didn't have a special diet. He liked his wife Linda's spaghetti, which wasn't anything special. He ate Chinese food. One of his favorite dishes was fried beef and oyster sauce. What Bruce Lee was eating, it wasn't anything special. So don't think that if you follow the Bruce Lee diet, that it's this big secret to why you're not getting ripped like Bruce Lee. Now, the workout stuff that Beerdy said, that's just plain hilarious. Beerdy pretty much made it clear to me that he doesn't know anything about working out or strength and conditioning. He said that Bruce Lee did a morning weight training session, and then what he shows is a German volume training workout that is probably like an entire week's worth of workouts. Now, first of all, German volume training is for bulking. GVT is sometimes referred to as the 10 by 10 workout, and the entire purpose of GVT is to put on mass quickly. This kind of workout is for bodybuilders. If you do martial arts, you shouldn't even be thinking about German volume training. I did a cycle of GVT about 7 or 8 years ago, and I wasn't training much of anything else because when you do German volume training, you pretty much only have time to lift, eat, and sleep. Bruce Lee never went anywhere near German volume training, and this kind of training, it didn't even really become popular until the late Charles Poliquin started writing about it within the last 30 years. Another thing, any intelligent person, they would only do 2 cycles at most in a year of German volume training, unless they're on the gear. Like I said, the purpose of German volume training is to build size, and size doesn't necessarily equate to getting stronger or being able to produce more power. So if you don't understand any of what I'm saying about German volume training, you only need to know this. Bruce Lee would not have trained like this because it would not have helped him reach his goal of being faster and being able to produce more power. Bruce was not a bodybuilder, and he didn't train like this. So if Bruce didn't do it, well, either Beerdy wasn't training like Bruce Lee, or well, there's the alternative possibility, which is more than likely the true situation.
Because we understood that this was clearly lying.
But I want to call cap on something else that Beerdy said. I mean, I already knew he was lying, but he said that no one else ever did anything like this, and that's not true. There's a video floating around the internet of Kobe Bryant talking about how someone can train for 6 or even 8 hours a day. Now, I don't know if you guys knew this, but Kobe Bryant was inspired by Bruce Lee. Kobe trained Jeet Kune Do during the off-season at one point during his basketball career. Mamba mentality, that comes from Bruce Lee. It's the reason why I wear these jerseys with Kobe Bryant's Black Mamba logo in all of my videos. So no, Beerdy, even if you were telling the truth, you're not the only person to try something like this, because Kobe Bryant really did train like Bruce Lee for 6 to 8 hours a day, and it's why he'll be remembered as one of the all-time greatest basketball players. So now that we've established that Beerdy doesn't know anything about how to train like Bruce Lee, I want you guys to remember what I said at the start of this video. I'm going to tell you what I would do if I were going to train like Bruce Lee for an entire year. And it's not going to take 14 hours a day of training or even 6 hours. According to John Little, Bruce Lee never worked out longer than 2 hours.
In Hong Kong, he was quoted as saying that he trained 2 hours a day. If he was doing a martial arts class at his home, where he'd be training with his students, well, there's a couple hours. His weight training routine, by my read of it, wouldn't have taken him more than 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes. And then his own personal development, his kicking. If you do 1,000 punches throughout the course of the day, and you didn't do them all at once, you might do 250 in the morning, another 250 in the afternoon, another 250 in the evening, and then the next day you do the same thing with his legs. That was what he trained. That's how he trained. 8 hours a day? No, not even close. It wasn't necessary. He would have to have thrown one punch and then laid down for a 5-minute nap and then go up and throw another one to stretch it out to the 8 hours.
And from reading through Bruce Lee's notes, I think that might include cardio, but even if it didn't, I can't see any reason why you would need to work out longer than an hour, not counting the cardio. Anyone who thinks they need more than that is either a combat sport athlete or you're probably wasting time in the gym when you could be training martial arts. And when I lay out this program, I'm assuming anyone trying to follow it studies martial arts, preferably internal martial arts, because one of the missions of my channel is to help internal martial artists become better athletes. All right, so I'm going to break this into 4 cycles or 4 phases based on the 4 phases of Bruce Lee's actual training career. Now, he started out doing mostly calisthenics because he developed the 2-finger push-ups and some of his other bodyweight skills before Alan Joe put him on his first weight training program. And the weight training program would mark his hypertrophy phase, or muscle building phase. After that, Bruce's focus shifted to speed and power, so that would be the power phase. The 4th phase is hard to really say, but based on what we know about him using the Marcy trainer at his home in Hong Kong, I would say it combines a little bit of everything, but also involves a lot of circuit training. Now, what I see in a lot of these Bruce Lee workout videos and blog posts that are circulating is either a focus on phase 2 or phase 4. And the thing is that phase 2 was very short-lived. Bruce Lee wasn't interested in getting swole and putting on size. And the problem with phase 4 is that Bruce was primarily training to look good for the movies. He wasn't necessarily focused on improving as a martial arts athlete. Another problem with these Train Like Bruce Lee videos is I see people who usually come for the aesthetics. They want to look like Bruce Lee. And really, the aesthetics, that was all a side effect of training with a focus on performance. Does that make sense? What I'm saying is you need to be focused on getting better as a martial arts athlete, not trying to look good. But anyway, now that I've given you the general idea, let's get into how this would look when you put it into practice. The first phase is really the most important because it's not only going to set the foundation for the rest of the training program, but it's the stuff that you're always going to be working to develop and improve. Bruce Lee had all of these skills or feats that he liked to perform, like handstands, 2-finger push-ups, L-sits, and dragon flags. So the first part of this phase of training is that you're going to pick a skill and spend 10 to 15 minutes a day working on some progression to develop that skill. The other part of the training, the calisthenics, that's really simple. You're just working on push-ups, pull-ups, squats, and flexibility. And the exercises also need to complement whatever the body weight skill is that you're training. So if I were working to get a single arm handstand like Bruce Lee, well, I would begin my training session with 15 minutes of handstand progressions. And then I'd follow that up with a 20-minute circuit of push-ups, pull-ups, squats, pike push-ups, and hollow body holds. I do that about 4 days a week. And the days that I don't do this little calisthenics circuit or strength circuit, I would do a lot of mobility drills in some type of stretching program. And if you want an example of what kind of mobility training I'm talking about, you can check out my video on GMB Elements where I go into more detail. And the Pioneer is also highly recommended GMB Elements for martial arts athletes. Phase 2 is going to represent when Bruce Lee started getting help from his friends like James Lee and Alan Joe about weight training. Now, as I mentioned in my last video about Bruce Lee's training methods, Alan Joe wrote Bruce Lee's program that helped him get up to just under 160 pounds in a short period of time. Now, someone could just follow the program on those cards that Bruce Lee did, but there's a much better, much more efficient way to do this. Remember, Bruce was following a program written by a bodybuilder. Alan Joe was actually the first Chinese American to win a bodybuilding competition in California. And this was at a time when even professional football players in the NFL thought that weight training was bad for their performance. So there wasn't anything out there as far as sport-specific strength and conditioning. For this, we're actually going to look at a program that ChatGPT suggested for a defensive back, because we want to put on muscle that would also make us better martial arts athletes. And the program you're going to be doing is not complicated at all. You're just doing power cleans, squats, deadlifts, bench press, shoulder press, pull-ups or lat pull-downs, and planks. This is nothing like that crazy German volume training program that Beerdy showed in his video. And it should take around 45 minutes to an hour to get in and out of the gym if you're not having to take long breaks, or you're not waiting on some idiot who decided to do curls in the squat rack. And if you're not experienced with any kind of Olympic lifting, my suggestion is to use kettlebells for the power cleans. You'll be surprised how much progress you can make just by doing heavy cleans with 2 kettlebells. And I have a video all about getting more explosive from doing those kinds of lifts with kettlebells. Now you're going to repeat this exact program 3 days a week for 12 weeks. Remember, each of these phases is 10 to 12 weeks, depending on if you need a deload week in the middle and at the end of each phase. And oh yeah, remember what I said about phase 1 being the most important phase of your training? Well, since you're only lifting 3 days a week, guess what you're doing on the off days? You're still working on your movement skill 10 to 15 minutes a day. You're still stretching and working on mobility drills for 10 to 15 minutes. So if you're not lifting, you're getting at least 30 minutes of practice towards developing those skills. And now remember, phase 3, this is the power phase. And this is something I talked about in the last video about Bruce Lee's training methods that no one talks about, especially not Beerdy. The big thing you're working on here is isometrics. And we know exactly what Bruce Lee was doing because John Little wrote about it, and I said it in that other video. You might want to check it out. Now, you have the option of finding a power rack to perform Bob Hoffman's isometric program that he laid out in his book, Functional Isometric Contraction. But I would just use something like the iso chain from Dragon Door. For one thing, Bruce Lee trained with the old school iso chain along with some other really strong dudes from the classic era of bodybuilding. And with Dragon Door's iso chain, you can get numerical feedback to give you an idea of how much weight you potentially lifted. I've actually gone through Bruce Lee's isometric program with the iso chain, but I actually would not do that particular program for this particular phase. What I would do is a 6x6, which consists of 6 sets of 6-second holds. That's a lot of sixes. And I would do the deadlift, front squat, row, bicep curl, and shoulder press. Now on top of that, I would continue to practice the movement skills and do a 10 to 15 minute version of the strength circuit from phase 1. Okay, and now we're at phase 4. And keep in mind that just because we're at phase 4, it doesn't mean that it's the end of the program. This is just the last part of this particular 12-month-long training cycle. Remember that Bruce Lee started this around 1962, and he continued training up to 1973 when he passed. So this isn't a one-year transformation that I'm talking about. This is how you can train for the rest of your life. In phase 4, for Bruce Lee, he was primarily focused on looking good for the movies. And performance, it took a bit of a back seat. At this point, most of his training was on the Marcy trainer, but I've read interviews where he said he was training 3 to 4 hours a day, depending on his schedule. On top of that, he was also running between 2 and 6 miles a day. Now me, I ran track in high school and in college. And then I did a lot of running when I was in the Navy. So scratch that for me. I hate running now, but I do enjoy skipping rope. So I'd find 30 minutes to skip rope about 3 to 4 days a week. As for my weight training, okay, so I'm going to take some ideas from the other phases. I'm going to do some circuit training like Bruce Lee did with his Marcy trainer, but I'm going to use kettlebells instead. If you watch Alex Richter's interview with John Little over on the Kung Fu Genius channel, you'll see Alex ask John if Bruce did anything with kettlebells. And I think John said he didn't come across anything in Bruce's notes. But the reason Alex asked the question is because Dan Inosanto said that Bruce was experimenting with kettlebell swings. Alex and I both got this information from Dr. Mark Chang, who was a student at the Inosanto Academy, but Doc also studied with one of Bruce's other students, Daniel Lee. So I'd say that's pretty reliable information from a reliable source. So I'd use kettlebells to do a 10-minute circuit of cleans, jerks, and swings. I'd keep training the bodyweight skills. I'd also continue doing isometrics with the iso chain. And if I'm doing isometrics daily, I might at this point consider moving to the Hoffman 8, which is the actual Bruce Lee isometric workout. I'm also going to continue doing the strength circuit from phase 1. That sounds like a lot, and the trick is that I'm not going to do all of this stuff every single day. If I'm going to train 5 days a week, maybe 3 days I do skills training, isometrics, kettlebells. And then the other 2 days I do mobility and stretching, isometrics, and the bodyweight strength circuit. The point is that in phase 4, I'm sort of working on a little bit of everything to see what gains I made from those individual phases. Now there's some more stuff that I would do, but based on the emails and the messages that I've received from you guys asking me to cover Bruce Lee's training or how internal martial arts people ought to train, I probably overloaded most of you with information by now. But here's a question. How does the program that I just laid out compare to Beerdy's crazy videos where he says Bruce Lee trained 14 hours a day doing some kind of crazy German volume training program? I mean, in my case, if I hadn't sold all of my stuff before I moved to Asia, this is exactly how I would be training right now in my garage gym. And if y'all help this channel to keep growing to the point where I can afford to move into a bigger place, I'm definitely down to do a training series on this to show you guys how I do it. And that's actually what I wanted to do when I first started this channel. But anyway, if you found this video interesting, the first thing I'd say is to go back and watch it again and take notes. The other thing I'd say is to stay tuned, because I have more videos coming in the Bruce Lee training series. And if you missed the first video in the series, go back and check out this video on the untold details of Bruce Lee's powerful training methods. It'll make this video make a lot more sense when I talk about the training cycles. But anyway, guys, hey, keep training, remember to breathe, and come back and see me on the next video.